Welcome to the Profile Corner. In today's video, I'll be sharpening a few chisels that I've got back here on a rack. I built this rack a year ago, roughly, and I bought many of the chisels that are on the rack at that time. I haven't had a chance to sharpen any of them yet, unfortunately. I have sharpened the Marples chisels here that I've had for years, probably about 23 years or so, and these are the only chisels that are essentially sharp on the rack back here beyond what the factory supplied for sharpness. The Narex chisels that I have here and down here typically have a factory sharpened edge that's much sharper than the Dewalt chisels that I have down here on the bottom. The Dewalt chisels down here are essentially used only for scraping glue after it's had about 2 hours to set up and before it's fully cured. I found that that's a rather effective method of eliminating glue without using water on a paper towel, which ends up smearing the glue into the grain of the wood. So that's been working pretty effectively. Unfortunately, before I bought these Dewalt chisels, I was doing the glue scraping with the Marples chisels, and that's a big no-no because that ended up damaging these, and now they've permanently have glue attached to them in various different spots. I've tried to remove that as best as possible so that the chisels are usable again. I found that in addition to using chisels, there's also paint scrapers that are fairly cheap that are sold on Amazon. I saw these mentioned on somebody else's YouTube channel, and I found that they've worked quite effectively at removing glue, and in many cases removing glue much easier than the chisels. I believe that these are Alway brand. If I can find the link for these on the Amazon site, I'll link to them. They're quite a bit cheaper than a set of chisels, but the Dewalt chisels that I've got down here were fairly cheap as it was. These have essentially a factory ground edge, and as you can see, that factory ground edge has some machining marks on them. It's not as smooth as what it should be. I'm in the process right now of straightening out the backs of these chisels. As you can see, I've done that on this one, and it appears as though Dewalt has hollowed out a portion of the back of the chisel, so I've got it flat up here and it's somewhat shiny. This one still has the factory grind on it, and it still has the machine marks because I have not started honing that one, and I'm using a classic honing stone. This one is actually a water stone to take care of the backs of the chisels so that I can get them smooth. I've already done the two larger sizes of the Dewalt chisels using the rougher grade of the honing stone, and then I'll be flipping the honing stone over to use the finer side. I learned to sharpen chisels back in the 1980s when I was attending a construction trades training program. Back then, we used a regular grinder to establish the basic edge on chisels, and then we use a honing stone that's lubricated with WD-40 to refine the edge and try to make the edge reasonably sharp. Back then, I was a big fan of Roy Underhill on his Woodwright Shop TV show on PBS, and I was always amazed at how easily his chisels cut through wood, regardless of how hard the wood was. It was always easy for him to use simple hand pressure to move the blade of the chisels effortlessly through the wood. And I was really surprised at that, and I think I figured out what he was doing behind the scenes. He had one of these machines that's in front of me behind the scenes, probably driven by a horse or something of that sort, to give him a refined edge on the chisels. Well, we'll skip this for right now, and I'll tell you that I used the method that I learned in the 1980s for several years, until I read about the scary sharp method in various woodworking magazines. I was really impressed with how polished of an edge you could get using the scary sharp method, but I never quite mastered that method. I worked at it for a while and I could never really find a flat enough surface to use to attach the sandpaper to get a very smooth edge. I had tried various different things such as a sheet of plywood. I think you're supposed to use plate glass, but I couldn't quite figure out where I could get plate glass from. So I used that approach to get a decent edge on chisels and various other tools until a friend of mine in the early 2000s mentioned that there's a product called a Tormek. This is a Tormek 2000 that's in front of me. I bought this in the early 2000s, and with all the accessories, it actually came at half price. So the Tormek 2000 wasn't $2,000, but with all the accessories, it was $1,000 back then. I'm sure it's a little bit more expensive than that, and they've probably come out with different model numbers for the Tormek sharpening system since that time. I haven't really been keeping up on it, but anyway, this is the tool that I'm going to be using after I get the backs flattened using the whetstone. Then I'll be grinding the bevel surface using this wheel. Years ago, I had been trying to use the side of the wheel to grind the back side of the chisels, and I ran into a bit of a problem when I got to this 1/4 inch Marples chisel, and it's still a problem today. I don't know if the camera's going to be able to pick this up, but I ended up rounding the corner of the chisel, so it's not actually a 1/4 inch wide chisel, it's slightly less than that. And so I'm trying to avoid that particular problem with these more expensive chisels that I've got back there on the rack by using a honing stone to flatten the back rather than a spinning stone on the Tormek. And roughly 12 years ago, Jeff Ferris, who now works for woodpeckers, put out a video when he was working for Tormek, and he was demonstrating how to restore the edge of a chisel. He essentially took a decent chisel and he smashed the tip of it using an axe or something of that sort, and then within about 6 minutes time he had that chisel sharp enough so that it could actually be used to slice through a sheet of paper without any difficulty. And I've tried the Dewalt chisels to do that with a factory grind, as well as some of the more expensive Narex chisels that I've got back here, and not one of them is able to slice through a sheet of paper on its edge. So we're going to work toward that goal today. I'll put a link to the video by Jeff Ferris in the video description in case you're interested in seeing that video. I'll be sharpening 1 or 2 chisels on the Tormek in this video. I'm not an expert at using this tool, even though I've had it for a number of years, but since I've watched Jeff's video, I've got a good refresher of how to make use of it. So I'm going to get back to flattening the backs of these chisels, and then we'll get started using the Tormek. And by the way, this Tormek wheel has absorbed at least 1 quart, if not 2 quarts of water that I've put into the tray down here. And so, since it's such a thirsty wheel, you want to make sure that you're not going to subject this to freezing temperatures unless the wheel's had some time to dry out, probably at least a month to dry out. And so you've got to be kind of careful with that. And also you want to use some sort of a tray underneath the unit to capture any water that ends up getting splashed out by the spinning wheel. Okay, I'll bring the camera back in a couple minutes after I finish polishing the back of the chisels, and then we'll get started with the Tormek. I'm using the diamond truing tool on the Tormek here to try to flatten out the wheel so that it's a consistent height all the way across. I'm supposed to do this for about a minute to a minute and a half, trying to true up the wheel. And now for good measure, I'm going to use a coarse side of the stone grater just to touch up the wheel. Now I've successfully sharpened the 1-inch wide Dewalt chisel so that it's able to cut paper. I did a quick test here. It's also able to cut wood, and I thought that I would bring the camera back and we'll take a look at sharpening the next chisel. And oddly enough, this black walnut that I've got back here on the chisel holder has become magnetized, and so that's kind of a neat little feature that holds the chisels so that they don't fall off. Quite a while to figure out how to get the grain properly aligned so that metal parts would stick to it. Well, maybe we can take a look at that in a later video. Anyway, back to playing with chisels here. I have the chisel in the holder here, and it's sticking out roughly 1.5 inches. I didn't measure it. And then I've got this angle finder. According to the sizes up here, I was able to fit it into the 25-degree angle. And so I'm guessing that that's the right size or the right angle for the chisel. And so I've set this over here at 25 degrees, this at 10. I can't recall exactly what this side over here does. Maybe that's for a micro bevel, and 10 is the regular setting. Anyway, I've got that set, and then I bring the chisel up and just take a peek here. I've got 2 plastic parts on this angle finder, and I believe that the heel right here and also the wheel is supposed to touch the grinding wheel, and then the rest of it is supposed to touch the blade, and it looks like I've got that set at 25 degrees. So now I've locked these down, and then because I changed the grind on this wheel, I need to reset it back to the coarse grind. So I'll do that right now. And it's only supposed to take about maybe 20 to 30 seconds to do this. Okay, and just to demonstrate here, this chisel, I've only flattened the back on it. It has a factory grind on the bevel, and it's not able to cut paper right now. It can tear paper, but it can't cut it. Okay, so we're going to put this back on here. And then I'll pass it back and forth. I believe I'm supposed to come halfway off the wheel on each side as I'm passing it back and forth, and that's to keep the grind or the amount of wear even all the way across. And I'm putting upward pressure on the handle at the base of the handle here, and downward pressure on to the blade as I'm passing it back and forth. Okay, let's check our progress here. And one thing that you can do is use black marker on the blade and that way you can tell for certain whether or not you're getting the bevel right. It looks like the bevel's slightly off, so I have a slight micro bevel unless I keep going with it. We are making a little bit of progress. I don't know if you can pick that up, but this on the top here, it's got a finer grind than the bottom portion. So I'll go back to using the coarse grind on the wheel. We'll take a look at our progress again. Here you can see that there's only a little bit of the original bevel left. We've got it ground down pretty well. I could stop here at this point, but I'd prefer not to have two bevels on the chisel, even though this is only used for removing glue. It might be nice to have a micro bevel on the very tip, but we can do that later on if we so desire. Okay, we've pretty well have taken care of that bevel so that it's all the way back now. It's still not sharp enough to cut paper. It's almost sharp enough, but not quite. So we've got some more work to do to it. Now we'll use the fine side of the grading stone for about 30 seconds. And this should be a quick process at the finer grit. It should only take maybe 30 to 45 seconds or so to regrind at the finer grit. Okay, let's see how we're doing here. Okay, it's a much more polished edge now. It's still not perfect. There's a burr on the back side that we'll have to get rid of. And the way you get rid of that is by using the stroking wheel that's out here, and we'll do that in just a moment. Let's see if it cuts paper now. That still tears it. So we've got to hone it now. So I'll spin this around. And before I had the grinding wheel turning into the bevel of the chisel. And now what I want to do is I want to have the honing wheel turning away from the bevel of the chisel, because I don't want the bevel of the chisel digging into this. I've got to apply a little bit of paste to the wheel out here. Okay, we'll do the back side for maybe about 30 seconds. And then we'll flip it over to the front side for about 25 seconds, and then we'll rotate back and forth a couple times until that burr is gone. Okay, onto the bevel here. I've got to thank the woodworking channel, Woodworking with Gerry, for getting me interested again in trying to get these chisels polished up and sharpened finally. I saw that he did a recent video with a Tormek, and I left a comment and he responded back and he gave me some suggestions. And so that's another channel that you may want to follow if you haven't already. I'll put a link to his channel in the video description. He's a retired professional woodworker after doing various other things earlier in life, and he still builds various furniture pieces and puts together educational videos on his channel. Okay, so we're probably good enough here. Let's turn it off. Clean off the chisel here. Yeah, it's still a little bit dirty, but we've got pretty much a mirror polish on both the back side up here at the cutting edge and also on the front side. There's a little bit of honing compound still there. Otherwise, it would be quite clear that that's pretty much a mirror edge or a mirror finish on the chisel. So let's see if it's able to cut paper now. Now watch where I put my finger, otherwise I'll be cutting through that too. And that does a really nice job cutting through paper. Now the question is, how well will it cut through Titebond 2 glue? That's still remaining to be answered. But I may set these chisels aside now that I've got at least 2 of them already highly sharpened, and instead go back and use these scrapers that seem to be working fairly well until these get dull. And then I'll have to probably find some way of sharpening these. Okay, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye.